Well, Senator, another caravan of migrants is headed through Mexico right now to our southern border. They seem to be growing by the day. Take a listen to one of those migrants, what they are saying. Watch.
I will be real with Joe Biden administration.
You'll be with Joe Biden?
Because he's the one that welcomed me to the U.S.
Okay.
Yeah, even if he's not contesting again, I will join the party.
You'll join the party?
Exactly.
As you wouldn't have tried this journey, you would have submitted yourself to the Nigerian government under the Trump administration to kill you.
He will turn me back.
Senator, we've seen so many migrants say they're coming because of Biden's policies. But this guy, he says he's going to join the Democratic Party, him and his family. Do you think this is why the administration is turning a blind eye to what's happening at our borders?
Well, honestly, look, I think the administration has two things going on. The first is, Lindsay, is that they think that anything that Donald Trump did, they have to be the opposite of, even if it makes sense. And I guess border security for them, it doesn't matter that it makes sense. And it doesn't matter what Joe Biden and everybody else used to say. And I think the other, look, I feel terrible for people like that gentleman you saw there, that man. I mean, look, he just wants a better life, but there has to be a process for people to come. And when they believe, and rightfully, that if they get to America, they're going to be allowed to stay, because that's what's happening, more people are going to be encouraged to come. So, not just the caravan they're talking about, that's what the press is covering. There's thousands of other people headed here that are not part of that caravan, that are coming through different ways, often at the hands of these terrible, inhumane, criminal trafficking networks. And as far as joining the party, I don't know if that's the route. Maybe they think long-term that's what it's going to lead to. But I actually believe that this administration and these people on the far left that surround this administration are among the group of people that believe there shouldn't be any borders, that there should be the free flow of people and no impediments to the free flow of people. And they give lip service to border security because they know the majority of American people are for it, but they have no real intention to ever enforce it.
Senator, I want to pick up on what you just said about what they believe, because I believe that what he said in that clip that you played in your ad from 2007 is probably what most Americans believe, and frankly what I think Joe Biden believes until he became president and had to lead the far left of his party. I mean, I guess my question to you is, how much more can we get out that this is what he said? All we need Joe Biden to do is listen to Joe Biden and abide by Joe Biden's words that he had expressed in 2007. So I guess simply put, how do we get his own words out there more?
Well, it's harder than it's ever been, because journalism in America is practically dead. All the major news outlets have become the propaganda ministry for the governing party in this country. And so they don't hold any of these things to account. If this was happening in the reverse, if this was, let's say, a border crisis going on right now under a Trump administration, they would largely blame it on the Trump administration. And the other thing they would be focusing on is the inhumane treatment. Why are we sending people back? And this time it's kind of just being ignored. I mean, there's been some coverage to it, but it's been largely ignored at the scale and scope that we're talking about. And so it is hard to get it out there, but people are aware of it. And this is going to continue to go on. Look, just from Haiti alone, there are between 90 and 120,000 people in the Western Hemisphere, in different countries outside of Haiti, that are in some form of process trying to get here. That's just from one country. We've seen an uptick, frankly, from all over the world. And the reason is simple. The word has gone out to as many people around the world as you can imagine, that if you can arrive at the southern border of the United States, you turn yourself into border agents, you may be detained for a couple weeks, but you will ultimately be released into the general population pending a court hearing that you probably won't show up for. And once that word gets out, people start coming.
Unbelievable.
President Biden is traveling to Europe tomorrow for the G20 Summit. And according to Jake Sullivan, Biden will be laser focused on supply chain and energy prices. But Senator, aren't these policies to blame, his policies to blame for what we're seeing, this crisis?
Yeah, by the way, the supply chain and inflation, none of these things are new. They knew they were coming. People have been warning about it. The inflation has been juiced up by hundreds of billions of dollars of additional government spending under the Biden administration. One of the first things he did is pump hundreds of billions and more dollars into the economy, juicing things up. Supply chain was moving forward. We already saw that building in September, October, in April and May. They denied it. And look, I'd say two things. If more of these things that we're trying to buy were made in America or in countries closer to America instead of China, we wouldn't have the supply chain problem. The other thing so we got to focus on that. He's not. And the other thing we got to be focused on is these crazy laws in California. Not enough coverage has been given to it. Independent truckers, as an example, will not go into California and haul things out because you have to be an employee of a California company. You have to pay income tax for the day that you're working there. What independent trucker in their right mind is going to consistently go to California, become an employee of a California company, and subject themselves to California income tax for the day that they're there? They're not going to do it. And so apart from the fact that we have a trucker shortage in this country, But again, Biden won't say or do anything about that because he'd have to take on the radical left wing, which controls his party, which they rely on for fundraising and door knocking and all the activism. California is the model woke state, and it's now hurting the country as a result of it.
I think that is very well put. During the trip that Lindsay mentioned, the president's going to meet with Pope Francis. You and I are both Catholic. How important do you think it is for the Pope to bring up Biden's position on abortion? Because I feel like it really didn't get any attention when Pelosi visited it. And with all due respect to the Pope, if he doesn't raise this issue with Biden, I feel like he loses a little bit of credibility, but not just him, but frankly, I think all priests have a hard time talking to people about the dangers of abortion and about the positive nature of being pro-life if the Pope himself won't bring it up with leaders like Pelosi and Biden.
Well, the Pope has made clear what the Church's teachings are, and the Pope doesn't have the authority to change those teachings and has no intention to, in my opinion, and that is that abortion is murder. I don't know what the pontiff is going to raise when he meets President Biden in private. I imagine that on the public agenda, they'll discuss things like climate change and migrants and things of this nature around the world. And I get that the function of the Church is different, right? They're thinking about how can we help people avoid, for example, these people that they're not looking so much at migration as the root causes of it, and how do we treat them as human beings. I don't know what he'll raise privately. What I can tell you that I am very concerned about, however, is that the Church, and not just the Catholic Church, but faith communities in the United States are being targeted to not speak out about these issues here in our country. As an example, as part of this bill that they're trying to put out there, there's going to be a federal takeover of pre-K and child care. And what it's going to say, according to the House bill they've already passed on this, is if you are a faith-based organization and you want to participate in this, what will be a universal pre-K and child care federal program, you won't be able to teach about your faith, and you cannot apply the teachings of your faith to your hiring practices. So if someone shows up and they're an atheist, you have to hire them. If someone shows up and they're anti-Catholic and you're a Catholic school, they can't discriminate on the basis of that, not to mention if they're transsexual or living a lifestyle that goes contrary to the teachings of the Church. And I hope things like that, religious liberties in the United States, are an issue that the Pope will raise when he meets with the president, whether he does it privately or publicly. And of course, I hope he also raises the issue of life, because it's a predominant and important issue. It's not a political issue, it's a moral issue, and I do hope he raises it. I don't know if he will.
I do want to switch gears with you before we let you go to Democrat spending. Your Democratic colleague from Oregon, Ron Wyden, he proposed a new tax plan to pay for the Democrats' radical spending agenda. He wants to tax billionaires. We've talked about this before. Those who bring in $100 million for 3 years in a row. To get this, they say ensure the wealthiest people in the country pay their fair share. We hear them say that all the time, fair share, whatever that means. But if you make $100 million, I'm pretty sure that's probably not coming just through payroll. It's coming through investments, other various things. Are they just creating a tax shelter here that really isn't going to have any effect, and it's not going to get, in the end, what they're looking for?
Yeah, I think what they're creating here is the equivalent of a federal property tax. They're going to force people to pay taxes on the value of something they own, not when they sell that, but because they own it. So let's say you're a billionaire and you have an art collection. They're going to force you to value the art collection, and they're going to force you to pay over some period of time the unrealized, gains from that art, the value of it. It's like property taxes. It'll be a federal one. So here's the problem with that. Number one is once you set that up, like that sort of, first you have to hire an army of agents at the IRS to do appraisals, who owns what and how much is it worth and how much do you owe us. But the second thing is, once you've set up what's the equivalent of a federal property tax, well, today it's on billionaires, but what about in a couple of years when they need, $1 trillion more to pay for the debt that they're running? They just keep going down the income scale. Once you create these taxes, you can then start applying it down until you reach as many people as you need to in order to get the money. And that's their goal. They start with the billionaires, but they're not going to end there because it won't generate the revenue they need. Right. They're going to keep going down. They'll say, well, what about the multimillionaires? What about the millionaires? What about the people making $450? Right. And they'll keep going down until they generate enough money down the road. That's what their goal here is to put in place these socialist programs that they know will never be repealed.
That's exactly what happened with the alternative minimum tax. Senator Marco Rubio, thanks for joining us. But also, and more importantly, thanks for bringing up that 2007 clip that you put in your ad and highlighting it. It's so important. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you for having me.